I'm Jean, 34 female. I live in a city that never seems to sleep, in a small but comfortable apartment that has always been my sanctuary. For 10 years, I poured my soul into my career as a senior marketing strategist at a top-tier firm, building campaigns for brands everyone knows. My life was structured, successful, and I thought, supported by a family I believed would be my safety net no matter what. That belief was about to be shattered in the most spectacular way, leading to a year of silence that culminated in a single evening, where everything they thought they knew about me was proven wrong. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. For most of my life, the word family was synonymous with a certain kind of predictable, reliable comfort. We weren't the type to have loud, dramatic fights or heartwarming movie moment embraces, but we were consistent. Sunday dinners at my mother Helen's house were a mandatory ritual, a weekly check-in where my older brother David would recount his latest courtroom victory, and his wife Sophia would detail the upcoming exhibits at her prestigious art gallery. My mother, a retired accountant, would listen with quiet pride, her world revolving around the tangible successes of her children. And I, Jean, would share my own achievements from the corporate world, another piece in the mosaic of our family's respectability. David, 5 years my senior, had always been the golden child. From a young age, he was groomed for success. He was sharp, ambitious, and carried himself with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never known failure. He became a corporate lawyer at a powerful firm, and his life, complete with a beautiful wife and a sprawling suburban home, was the very picture of accomplishment. He saw the world in black and white, in wins and losses, and he had little patience for anything he considered a weakness or a misstep. His advice was always direct and pragmatic, often bordering on condescending. "Just work harder, Jean," he'd say if I mentioned a tough project. "Effort is a choice." His wife, Sophia, was elegant and poised, a perfect match for David's ambition. She ran one of the city's most exclusive art galleries and moved in circles that I only read about in magazines. Sophia wasn't overtly unkind, but she had a way of making you feel small without saying a single critical word. It was in the slight raise of an eyebrow when I mentioned my favorite mainstream movie, or the faint, polite smile when I wore a dress from a department store instead of a boutique. She and David were a unit, a formidable duo of judgment and success, and their approval was the currency our family ran on. My mother, Helen, was the quiet matriarch who held it all together. Having spent 40 years meticulously balancing ledgers, she valued stability and predictability above all else. She loved us, I have no doubt, but her love was often expressed through a lens of practicality. She wasn't one for emotional outpourings. Instead, she'd offer unsolicited financial advice or remind us of the importance of saving for retirement. Her mantra was, "You make your bed, you lie in it." It was her way of teaching independence, but it often felt like a warning against ever needing help. She was immensely proud of David's clear-cut success, and was, I think, a little baffled by my career in marketing, an industry she considered fluffy and less secure than law or finance. My place in this family was the creative, slightly less predictable younger sister. My success was real. I was good at my job, respected by my colleagues, and earning a very comfortable living. I'd led campaigns that won awards and had been on the fast track to a vice president position. But in my family's eyes, my career lacked the gravitas of David's. It was seen as less essential, more of a passion than a serious profession. Still, I thought we were close. We celebrated holidays together, remembered birthdays, and showed up for each other. I babysat their kids, helped my mom with her garden, and listened to David's endless stories about his legal battles. I believed that beneath the polished exterior and the quiet judgment, there was a foundation of unconditional love and support. I thought that if I ever truly fell, they would be there to catch me. The illusion was reinforced by countless small gestures over the years. When David was studying for the bar exam, my mom cooked every meal for him for 6 months so he could focus. When Sophia wanted to launch her own gallery, my parents gave her a substantial, interest-free loan to secure the perfect location. Help was available in our family. You just had to be on the right side of the unspoken hierarchy. I had never needed to ask for it, as my path had been relatively smooth. My independence was something they praised, not realizing it was a product of my circumstances, not a rejection of their support. The only person who seemed to see through the facade was my best friend, Ben. We'd known each other since college, and he was the closest thing I had to a real sibling. A brilliant UX/UI designer, Ben was creative, empathetic, and saw the world in shades of gray. He was the one I called after a frustrating Sunday dinner, the one who understood the subtle digs and the weight of unspoken expectations. "They love you, Jean," he'd say, "but they love the idea of you being perfect more." I usually brushed it off, defending them. "They're just practical people, Ben. That's how they show they care." He would just nod, a look of skepticism in his eyes that I chose to ignore. Looking back, the signs were all there. The conversations that always steered back to David's career. The way my professional challenges were met with simple, dismissive advice instead of genuine curiosity. The subtle but constant pressure to measure up to a standard I had no interest in meeting. I was part of the family, but I was on the B team, the supporting act to David's main event. It was a comfortable enough role to play when things were going well. I had my own life, my own friends, my own success. I didn't need to be the star of their show. I mistakenly believed that my role as a daughter and a sister was a given, a permanent position that couldn't be revoked. I thought that blood was thicker than pride, thicker than disappointment, thicker than money. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how quickly that comfortable illusion of support could be stripped away, leaving behind a cold, hard reality that would change the course of my life forever. The stage was set, not for a family drama, but for a personal reckoning. The end of my 10-year career came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a day like any other, gray, drizzly, and filled with back-to-back meetings. Our company, a titan in the marketing world, had been rumored to be undergoing a strategic restructuring, a corporate euphemism that always sent a chill down the collective spine of the office. But I felt safe. I was a top performer. My team had just landed a massive new client, and I was in the middle of mapping out a campaign that I was genuinely excited about. I was so confident in my position that I had just put a down payment on a small condo, eager to finally invest in some property of my own. At 3:15 p.m., an email popped into my inbox from Human Resources. The subject line was bland, "Meeting request." My boss was copied. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I walked down the hall to the conference room, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent office. The meeting was short, sterile, and brutal. My position, along with the entire department, was being eliminated. A larger conglomerate had acquired our parent company, and they were bringing in their own in-house marketing team. It wasn't about performance, it was about redundancy. I was given a small severance package, a box for my personal items, and an escort to the door by a security guard who wouldn't meet my eyes. Within the span of 30 minutes, a decade of my life was erased. I sat in my car in the parking garage for what felt like an hour, the shock rendering me immobile. My mind raced, replaying the impersonal speech from the HR representative. Market consolidation, synergistic alignment, workforce optimization. The words were meaningless, a hollow script designed to soften a blow that felt like a physical assault. My identity was so deeply intertwined with my job that I felt like a part of me had been amputated. I wasn't just unemployed, I was no longer Jean, the successful marketing strategist. I was just Jean, and for the first time in my adult life, I was terrified. My first call was to my mother, Helen. I needed to hear a comforting voice, to be told that everything would be okay. I reached her as she was preparing dinner. I explained what happened, my voice cracking as the reality of the situation finally sank in. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I expected sympathy, maybe an offer to come over, some words of reassurance. Instead, her first question was, "Did you get a good severance package?" I mumbled something about it being standard. Her tone was pragmatic, devoid of emotion. Well, Jean, this is why you have an emergency fund. You need to update your resume immediately and start applying for new positions tomorrow. The market is competitive. Don't fall behind. I was stunned. Mom, I just lost my job, the job I've had for 10 years. I know, dear, she said, her voice distant. And wallowing won't get you a new one. Life is full of setbacks. You have to be practical. Make a budget, cut unnecessary expenses, and focus on the next step. Figure it out. The call ended soon after, leaving me colder than before. There was no, "I'm so sorry, honey." No. "Come home for dinner." Just a list of instructions, as if I were a failing business that needed a new strategic plan. My second call, made with dwindling hope, was to my brother David. He was the successful lawyer, the one who navigated the cutthroat corporate world. Surely, he would understand. I caught him just as he was leaving his office. I told him the news, and his reaction was even worse than our mother's. He let out a heavy sigh, the kind one makes when faced with a tedious inconvenience. "Jean, really? I thought your company was stable. Did you not see this coming? You have to pay attention to industry trends." "No, I didn't see it coming, David," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "It was a surprise to everyone." "Well, surprises happen when you're not prepared," he retorted, his tone dripping with condescension. "Look, I'm sure you'll land on your feet. The marketing world isn't exactly rocket science. Just polish up your LinkedIn profile. But listen, don't expect a handout. Sophia and I have our own financial commitments, the kids' private school, the mortgage. This is your problem to solve. You're an adult. Figure it out yourself." He said he had to go, that he had a dinner reservation he couldn't miss. He hung up before I could even respond. Figure it out yourself. The same words my mother had used, but laced with David's signature brand of dismissive arrogance. It felt like a slap in the face. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for a kind word, a moment of sympathy, a simple acknowledgement that my world had just been turned upside down. I hadn't even thought about money yet. I was still reeling from the emotional shock. But for them, it was the first and only thing that mattered. My personal crisis was immediately translated into a potential financial liability, a problem they wanted to distance themselves from as quickly as possible. I didn't bother calling Sophia. I knew her response would be a filtered, passive-aggressive version of David's. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring through my tears. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. The down payment I'd just made on the condo now felt like a catastrophic mistake. My emergency fund, which my mother had so coldly reminded me of, would be eaten up by that and my living expenses in a matter of months. The icy response from my family hurt more than losing my job. The job was a position, a title. It could be replaced. But the belief that my family would be there for me, that their love was a given, was a core part of my foundation. And in the span of 2 short phone calls, that foundation had crumbled into dust. They hadn't offered help, but more than that, they hadn't offered compassion. They saw my struggle not as a human experience, but as a failure in planning, a personal flaw. Their message was clear: you are on your own. As I sat in my silent apartment that night, surrounded by the artifacts of a life that no longer existed, their words echoed in my mind. Figure it out yourself. And in that moment of profound isolation and heartbreak, a tiny, cold spark of resolve began to ignite within me. Okay, I thought, I will. The days that followed were a blur of hollow routines and mounting anxiety. I woke up each morning to the jarring silence of no emails, no meetings, and no purpose. My apartment, once a place of refuge, started to feel like a prison. The 4 walls seemed to close in on me, each object a reminder of a life that was suddenly on hold. I tried to follow my mother's advice. I spent hours updating my resume, tailoring cover letters, and scrolling through job postings on LinkedIn. But the market was tougher than I'd anticipated. Senior positions were scarce, and for every opening, there were hundreds of applicants just like me, experienced, qualified, and recently laid off. The rejection emails started to pile up, each one a small, sharp sting. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." It was a polite, impersonal dismissal that chipped away at my confidence, piece by piece. My emergency fund, once a source of security, was now a ticking clock, its numbers dwindling with every bill I paid. The condo I had been so excited about was now a source of immense stress. I had to pull out of the sale, losing my substantial down payment in the process, a financial blow that felt like a punch to the gut. Throughout this period, the silence from my family was deafening. After those initial, brutal phone calls, there was no follow-up. My mother didn't call to see how I was doing. My brother didn't text to check in. It was as if my unemployment was a contagious disease they were afraid of catching. The weekly Sunday dinners, once a non-negotiable family ritual, became a source of dread. I forced myself to go the first Sunday after I lost my job, hoping for some semblance of support or at least a reprieve from the isolation. It was a mistake. I walked into my mother's house feeling fragile and exposed. The conversation flowed around me, carefully avoiding the one topic that consumed my every waking thought. David talked at length about a high-profile merger he was handling, while Sophia described the challenge of acquiring a rare sculpture for her gallery. My mother asked them detailed questions, her face beaming with pride. When she finally turned to me, her question was, "So, any luck on the job front?" It wasn't asked with warmth or concern, but with the same detached pragmatism she'd shown on the phone, as if she were inquiring about a stalled car. I tried to explain the difficulties of the current job market, the sheer volume of applicants for every role. David cut me off mid-sentence. "You're probably not aiming high enough or low enough, Jean," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "You need a better strategy. It's a numbers game. You should be sending out 50 applications a day minimum. It's not that complicated." Sophia chimed in, her voice laced with a delicate, patronizing sympathy. "It must be so difficult, having all that free time. I'd simply go mad if I didn't have my work to keep me busy. Perhaps you could take up a hobby, something to keep your spirits up." Her words, meant to sound kind, were incredibly insulting. She made my desperate, stressful search for employment sound like a leisurely vacation. I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation. They saw my situation as a simple problem with a simple solution, a failure of my own effort and strategy. They had no concept of the emotional toll it was taking on me. The conversation quickly moved on, leaving me sitting there, my plate untouched, feeling completely invisible. I left early that evening, making a flimsy excuse about needing to work on an application. No one tried to stop me. That dinner was a turning point. I realized they weren't just unsupportive, they were ashamed. My unemployment was a blemish on the perfect family portrait they had so carefully curated. A successful lawyer, a respected art curator, a retired accountant, and then there was me, the unemployed daughter, the sister who had failed to figure it out. I stopped going to Sunday dinners after that, offering vague excuses each week. To my surprise and my sorrow, no one pushed back. My absence was met with a quiet acceptance that felt like relief. My only lifeline during this time was Ben. He would call me every day, not to ask if I'd found a job, but to ask how I was. He listened patiently as I vented my frustrations about my family and my fruitless job search. He brought over pizza and movies, forcing me out of my spiraling thoughts for a few hours. He was the one who reminded me of my worth when I started to doubt it myself. "This isn't about you, Jean," he said one evening as we sat on my living room floor, surrounded by takeout containers. "It's a reflection of them. Their definition of love is conditional. It's tied to success, to status. You losing your job has just revealed the terms and conditions you never knew existed." He was right. Their love, their support, it had all been a transaction. As long as I was successful and independent, I was a valued member of the family. But the moment I stumbled, the moment I needed something from them, even just emotional support, the contract was voided. The true colors of my family were not angry or hateful, but something far worse, indifferent. I was an inconvenience, a problem they didn't want to deal with. The pain of that realization was profound. It was a grief deeper than losing a career. It was the loss of an idea, the death of the belief that I was unconditionally loved by the people who were supposed to love me most. That grief, however, slowly began to transform. It hardened from a raw, open wound into a cold, quiet resolve. They had told me to figure it out myself. They had left me to sink or swim, and as I hit rock bottom, I realized there was nowhere to go but up. I would swim. Not for them, not to prove them wrong, but for myself. I would build a new life, a new career, a new foundation, one that didn't rely on their conditional approval. For another month, I continued the soul-crushing routine of job hunting. I tweaked my resume a dozen times, wrote cover letters that felt increasingly dishonest in their forced enthusiasm, and sat through a few demoralizing interviews that led nowhere. The constant rejection, coupled with my family's complete abandonment, had eroded my self-esteem to its lowest point. I started to believe what their silence implied, that I was the problem, that maybe I wasn't as good at my job as I thought, that maybe I deserved to be in this position. Rock bottom wasn't the day I lost my job, it was the day I started to internalize my family's judgment. The turning point came on a rainy Wednesday. I had just received another rejection email for a job I thought was a perfect fit, a role I was genuinely excited about. It was the final straw. I closed my laptop, walked into my living room, and just broke down. It was a gut-wrenching, cathartic sob that seemed to release weeks of pent-up fear, anger, and grief. I wasn't just crying about the job, I was crying for the loss of my old life, the loss of my confidence, and most of all, the loss of my family as I knew them. As I sat there, emotionally exhausted, my friend Ben let himself into my apartment with a bag of groceries. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat on the floor with me, a quiet, solid presence until the tears subsided. Then, he looked at me and said something that would change everything. "Why are you trying to get back into a world that just kicked you out? You were one of the best strategists at your old firm. You had ideas they were too slow and bureaucratic to implement. Why are you begging them to let you back in? Why not build your own door?" His words hung in the air, simple and yet revolutionary. All this time, my focus had been singular: get another job like my old one, replicate the life I had lost. It had never occurred to me to question the path itself. Ben continued, his voice full of the energy I had been lacking for months. "Think about it, Jean. You know marketing inside and out. You understand brand strategy, digital outreach, and consumer behavior better than anyone I know. And I know how to build beautiful, intuitive user experiences. We see clients at our own agencies getting ripped off by big firms all the time. They overcharge, underdeliver, and use outdated models. We could do it better." A tiny flicker of an idea, long dormant, sparked to life within me. Before the layoff, I had often complained to Ben about the frustrations of my job. I had a vision for a new kind of marketing agency, one that was agile, data-driven, and focused on creating authentic connections between brands and their audiences. I wanted to build a company that was transparent with its clients and fostered a culture of genuine creativity, free from the crushing corporate politics that stifled innovation. It had always been a someday dream, a fantasy for a distant future. But now, with no job and nothing to lose, someday was suddenly here. "But Ben, I have no money," I said, the practical obstacles immediately flooding my mind. "I lost my down payment. My savings are almost gone." "So we start small," he countered, his eyes bright with excitement. "We don't need a fancy office. We can work out of your apartment. We don't need a huge staff. It'll just be the two of us to start. We can build a killer portfolio with a few small clients, maybe even do one project pro bono to get our name out there. We have the skills, Jean. The rest is just logistics." For the first time in months, I felt a surge of something other than despair. It was a fragile, tentative hope, but it was there. The idea was terrifying, but it was also electrifying. It was a chance to not just reclaim my career, but to rebuild it from the ground up, on my own terms. The rest of that evening was a whirlwind of creative energy. We pulled out a whiteboard and started brainstorming. We mapped out a business plan, identified our ideal client base, and came up with a name for our fledgling company, Aura Digital. The name was meant to represent the intangible energy that great marketing creates around a brand. The process was transformative. Shifting my focus from job hunting to business building changed my entire mindset. Instead of feeling powerless and waiting for someone else to give me an opportunity, I was creating my own. Every task, no matter how small, from registering the business name to designing a logo, felt like a constructive step forward, a brick being laid in the foundation of my new life. Ben was the perfect partner. His optimism and technical genius were the perfect complement to my strategic vision and industry knowledge. Where I saw problems, he saw solutions. He built us a sleek, professional website in a week, while I crafted a compelling pitch deck that highlighted our unique approach. My family remained completely in the dark. I didn't tell them about Aura Digital. I knew what their reaction would be. My mother would call it a reckless gamble. David would dismiss it as a desperate pipe dream. Their figure it out yourself mantra had been a curse, but I was now turning it into a creed. I would figure it out, but not in the way they expected. I wasn't just looking for another job to plug back into their picture of success. I was building something of my own, something they couldn't judge or control. The financial strain was immense. I sold my car, canceled every subscription I had, and lived on a shoestring budget. Ben poured a small portion of his own savings into the business to cover initial startup costs, a gesture of faith that brought tears to my eyes. It was the hardest and most stressful period of my life, but it was also the most empowering. I was working harder than I ever had, fueled by coffee, ambition, and a burning desire to prove to myself that I could succeed. The blueprint was no longer about finding a job, it was about building an empire, however small it might be at first. The pain of my family's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it was now channeled into a powerful, motivating force. They had left me in the rubble of my old life, but they didn't realize I was using the broken pieces to build something stronger than they could ever imagine. The first 6 months of Aura Digital were a relentless grind. Our office was my small apartment living room, a space cluttered with 2 desks, a massive whiteboard covered in strategic diagrams, and a perpetually running coffee pot. My days, which had once been structured by corporate calendars, now bled into nights and weekends. Sleep became a luxury. Social events were a distant memory. My entire existence was poured into getting our company off the ground, fueled by a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. Our first client was a local organic bakery struggling to build an online presence. They had a fantastic product, but a non-existent digital footprint. We offered to handle their social media and local SEO for a fraction of what a big agency would charge. I crafted a heartfelt, community-focused marketing strategy, and Ben built them a beautiful, user-friendly website that showcased their story. Within 2 months, their online orders tripled, and their foot traffic increased by 40%. They were ecstatic and became our most vocal advocates, referring us to other small business owners. That first small victory was like a shot of adrenaline. It was tangible proof that our model worked. We took the case study from the bakery and used it to pitch slightly larger clients, a boutique fitness studio, a nonprofit organization, a tech startup. Each new client was a battle. We were an unknown entity, a 2-person team operating out of a living room. We had to be better, smarter, and more passionate than our established competitors. I poured all my years of experience into our pitches, not just presenting data, but telling a story about each potential client's brand and how we could elevate it. Ben's design work was flawless, intuitive, and beautiful, giving us a visual edge that made us look far more established than we were. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to build a reputation. We were known for being hands-on, for delivering measurable results, and for genuinely caring about our clients' success. We weren't just a vendor, we were a partner. The work was all-consuming. There were moments of crippling self-doubt, nights when I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, convinced we were going to fail. My savings were gone, and I was living off the small, inconsistent revenue from our early projects. The financial pressure was immense, a constant weight on my shoulders. Throughout this period, I maintained my silence with my family. I had stopped offering excuses for my absence from Sunday dinners. I just stopped showing up. My mother would occasionally send a curt text message. "Are you still looking for a job?" I would reply with a vague, non-committal, "working on some things." I knew any attempt to explain my new venture would be met with skepticism and lectures about risk. My brother, David, made no effort to contact me at all. From his perspective, I had likely fallen off the face of the earth, another one of life's problems that had conveniently solved itself by disappearing. The isolation from them was painful, but it was also liberating. Free from their judgment, I was able to focus entirely on my work. Their dismissal had inadvertently given me a gift, the freedom to fail without an audience. Ben was my rock, my co-founder, and my entire support system. He celebrated every small win with me and talked me off the ledge during every crisis. He was the one who, 6 months in, sat me down and showed me our revenue projections. "Gene, look at this," he said, pointing to a steadily climbing graph. "We're not just surviving, we're growing. It's time to think bigger." The opportunity to do so came from an unexpected place. A mid-sized tech company, one we considered a dream client, was looking for a new marketing agency. Their current firm was one of the industry giants, the kind of place I would have been desperate to work for a year ago. We knew we were the long shot, the David against a Goliath, but we decided to go for it. We spent 2 solid weeks preparing our pitch, barely sleeping. I used my insider knowledge of how large agencies operated, their slow response times, their cookie-cutter strategies, their bloated budgets, to highlight our own strengths: agility, custom solutions, and cost efficiency. The pitch meeting took place in a sterile, intimidating boardroom. We were up against 3 massive, well-known agencies. When it was our turn, I walked in with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I didn't present a marketing plan, I presented a new philosophy. I spoke about authentic engagement in an age of digital noise. Ben then unveiled a mock-up of a redesigned digital experience for their brand that was so sleek and intuitive it drew audible gasps from the executives. We left the meeting feeling like we had given it our all, but we were convinced they would go with the safe, established option. A week later, I got the call. They were offering Aura Digital the contract. It was a multi-year, 7-figure deal that would transform our company overnight. I dropped the phone, my legs giving out from under me. Ben and I just hugged in the middle of our living room office, laughing and crying at the same time. We had done it. Against all odds, we had landed the kind of client that would put us on the map. This contract was the catalyst for explosive growth. We immediately hired a small team of talented strategists, designers, and developers, finally moving out of my apartment and into a real office space. It was a beautiful, open-concept loft that buzzed with creative energy. I was no longer just a marketer, I was a CEO. I was responsible for payroll, for managing a team, for shaping a company culture. It was the most challenging and rewarding work of my life. As our 1-year anniversary approached, Aura Digital was thriving. We had a growing roster of impressive clients and a reputation for being one of the most innovative new agencies in the city. I was finally financially stable, more so than I had ever been in my previous job. But the success felt incomplete. The people who should have been proudest of me had no idea it was even happening. The silence between us had stretched for so long it had become a permanent fixture in our relationship. But an idea began to form in my mind, a way to break that silence not with words, but with an undeniable demonstration of what I had built in the darkness of their neglect. It was time to host a gala. The Aura Digital Visionary Gala was conceived as a celebration and a massive strategic move. On the surface, it was a 1-year anniversary party for our company, a thank you to our clients, partners, and dedicated team. It was a chance to announce our success, showcase our work, and position ourselves as a major player in the industry. But for me, it had a second, deeply personal purpose. It was a reckoning. It was the stage on which I would finally confront my family's indifference, not with anger or accusations, but with the undeniable, glittering reality of my success. We hosted the event at one of the city's most iconic venues, a stunning modern art museum. It was a place Sophia, my sister-in-law, had always dreamed of hosting one of her gallery events but had never managed to secure. The irony was delicious. We spared no expense. We had a live jazz band, gourmet catering, and a guest list that included some of the city's most influential business leaders, tech entrepreneurs, and media personalities. The centerpiece of the evening was a planned announcement. Aura Digital would be launching a pro bono program, offering our services to 10 deserving nonprofits over the next year, a cause I was deeply passionate about. My family received their invitations 2 weeks before the event. They were thick, elegant cards, embossed with the Aura Digital logo. The invitation named me, Jean, as the host and CEO. I sent them without any personal note, curious to see how they would react. My mother called me the day she received it, her voice filled with a confusion that bordered on suspicion. "Jean, what is this? This Aura Digital? Is this the company you're working for now? It says you're the host." "I don't work for them, Mom," I replied, my voice calm and even. "I own the company. I'd love for you, David, and Sophia to be there." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to reconcile the daughter she had written off with the CEO hosting a black-tie gala. She mumbled something about checking their schedules and hung up. I knew they would come. Their curiosity and their desire to be seen at an exclusive event would be too strong to resist. The night of the gala, I was a bundle of nerves and steely resolve. I wore a simple but elegant emerald green dress, a color that symbolized new beginnings. As I stood near the entrance, greeting guests, I watched my family arrive. My mother, Helen, looked bewildered, her eyes wide as she took in the scale and opulence of the event. David and Sophia walked in with an air of practiced confidence, but I could see the cracks in their composure. They scanned the crowd, their expressions a mixture of surprise and skepticism. They clearly hadn't expected this. I let them mingle for a while, watching from a distance as they navigated a world where they were not the center of attention. I saw Sophia talking to the museum director, her expression strained as he licked. Ely explained that Aura Digital was the evening's generous sponsor. I saw David trying to network with a tech CEO who was one of our biggest clients, only to be met with a polite but brief acknowledgement. For the first time, they were on the outside looking in. Finally, I approached them. "I'm so glad you could make it," I said, my voice steady. "Jean," David said, recovering his composure and adopting a tone of magnanimous approval. "This is quite the setup. I had no idea your little project had become so substantial. You should have told us." "You never asked," I replied simply, letting the words hang in the air. Sophia forced a smile. "It's all very impressive, Jean. Truly. We're so proud of you for finally landing on your feet." Her words were meant to sound supportive, but the subtext was clear. They still saw my journey through the lens of their own narrative. I was the struggling sister who had finally managed to do something right. They had no concept of the struggle, the sacrifice, or the fact that their lack of support had been the fuel for my fire. The moment of truth came halfway through the evening when Ben and I took the stage to address the crowd. The room fell silent. I stood at the podium, the spotlight warm on my face, and looked out at the sea of faces. My eyes found my family, standing near the back, watching me with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. I started by thanking our clients and our team. Then I began to tell a story. "A little over a year ago," I began, my voice clear and strong, "I lost everything I thought defined me. I lost my job, my career path, and my sense of security. I was told to figure it out on my own, and in that moment of absolute darkness, I was forced to do just that." I didn't mention them by name. I didn't have to. I saw David's smile falter. I saw my mother's face pale. Sophia stared at the floor. "That darkness became the birthplace of Aura Digital," I continued. "This company wasn't just built on a business plan, it was built on resilience. It was built during late nights in a tiny apartment, funded by the last of my savings and the unwavering faith of my co-founder, Ben. I gestured to Ben, and the room erupted in applause. It was forged in silence, without a safety net, because I learned that the only safety net you can truly rely on is the one you build for yourself. I then announced our nonprofit initiative, and the room buzzed with excitement and approval. As I finished my speech and the applause washed over me, I looked at my family again. Their smiles were gone, replaced by masks of shock and, I thought, a glimmer of shame. The narrative they had constructed, of their successful son and their struggling daughter, had just been publicly and spectacularly dismantled. I wasn't the one who had to figure it out. I was the one who had figured it out, on a scale they could never have imagined. After the speech, dozens of people came to congratulate me. My family hung back, awkward and out of place. They understood now. They understood that the company whose name was on every banner, the company sponsoring this lavish event, was mine. The success they were witnessing wasn't something I had stumbled into. It was something I had built from the ashes of the life I had when they turned their backs on me. The confrontation was complete, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice or point a single finger. My success was my response. The gala was my closing argument. And as I watched them retreat towards the exit, their shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before, I knew they had finally heard me. In the days following the gala, the silence that had defined my relationship with my family for a year was finally broken, but not in the way I might have once hoped. The first to reach out was my mother, Helen. She left a long, rambling voicemail, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. She talked about how surprised and impressed she was. She said they had no idea the scale of what I was doing. Tucked between the awkward compliments was a sentence that revealed everything. "We would have helped you, Jean, if we knew you were going to be this successful." Her words confirmed what I had suspected all along. Their support was never about my well-being, it was about backing a winner. They hadn't wanted to invest in my struggle, only to claim a stake in my success. The message wasn't an apology, it was a regretful admission that they had bet on the wrong horse. I didn't call her back right away. I needed time to process the complicated mix of vindication and sorrow that her message stirred in me. A few days later, an email from David appeared in my inbox. It was formal, almost like a business proposal. He congratulated me on my impressive enterprise and noted the significant buzz the gala had generated in the business community. Then came the real purpose of his email. He mentioned that his law firm was looking to expand its portfolio of clients in the tech and marketing sector and suggested that Aura Digital could benefit from their top-tier legal services. He even offered a family discount. The audacity of it was breathtaking. After telling me not to expect a handout and offering zero support when I was at my lowest, he now saw my company as a lucrative business opportunity. He saw me not as his sister, but as a potential client. I typed a short, polite reply. "Thank you for the offer, David, but we are already represented by a firm that has been with us from the beginning." I hit send without a moment's hesitation. Sophia's attempt at reconciliation was perhaps the most transparent of all. She sent me a lavish bouquet of lilies with a handwritten card inviting me to a private viewing at her gallery. The card was filled with effusive praise for my impeccable taste and business acumen. It was a clear attempt to absorb me into her world of social prestige, to align her brand with my newfound success. It was all so transactional, so hollow. They weren't trying to reconnect with me, Jean, their sister and daughter. They were trying to connect with Jean, the CEO of Aura Digital. I finally met with my mother for coffee a week later. She sat across from me, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her. She tried to explain her actions, falling back on her lifelong mantra of practicality. "I just wanted you to be self-sufficient, Jean," she said, stirring her coffee endlessly. "I worried that if I helped you, you wouldn't learn to stand on your own 2 feet." "I needed support, Mom, not a lesson," I told her, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't need your money. I needed you to ask how I was. I needed you to believe in me when I didn't believe in myself." The truth of those words hung between us, an unbridgeable chasm. She couldn't understand that emotional support was just as valuable, if not more so, than financial stability. We talked for an hour, but it felt like we were speaking different languages. I left the cafe with a sense of sad closure. I would always love her as my mother, but I no longer expected her to be the parent I needed. My relationship with them has found a new, distant equilibrium. I attend major holidays, but the illusion of closeness is gone. The conversations are polite, superficial, and carefully curated to avoid any real emotion. David no longer offers condescending advice, and Sophia treats me with a newfound, cautious respect. But it's the respect one gives to a business associate, not a family member. The old dynamic is broken, but it hasn't been replaced by something better, just something different. The wound is no longer raw, but a scar remains. My true family, I've learned, is not defined by blood but by choice. My family is Ben, my brilliant co-founder and unwavering friend, who saw potential in my wreckage and helped me build an empire from it. My family is my incredible team at Aura Digital, a group of creative, passionate people who show up for each other every single day. My family is the community we are building, the nonprofits we are helping, and the clients whose dreams we are helping to realize. My life today is fuller and more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. Aura Digital continues to grow, and I've found a deep sense of purpose in my work. I did, in the end, figure it out. But the victory isn't in the money, or the success, or the look on my family's faces at the gala. The real victory was in discovering my own strength. It was in learning that my worth isn't determined by my job title or the approval of others, but by my own resilience, my own integrity, and my own capacity to build a life of purpose. They told me to figure it out myself, and in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift I could have ever received: the chance to discover who I truly am without them.